You know, something that you said there that really made sense is you don't value what you have, which is so important. And that comes with slow growth as well, because you start to appreciate the little things a bit more. Like, you know, if you've been handed $1 million within a day, for example, whereas if you have to accumulate $1 million over 5 years, it's a very different mindset in how you spend it and how you preserve it. And I think that's where the sort of degenerate behavior comes from is the lack of preserving mentality, you know, and it's this abundance mentality that I'll just get more or I'll make it work. But I think we were talking about it earlier, but there's like, you only have moments to capitalize on certain things. Like, for example, that Hawk Tuah Girl, you know, like she's gone viral and she's got all this fame within a few days. You know, you got a Hawk Tuah, spit on that thing, you feel me? But the fact that everyone was talking about it and, you know, got her that viral moment, I was good on her. Like, you know, you got that moment, capitalizing on that moment, but it's about having the right people around you to make sure it's you as well. And maybe, you know, sort of Demiculus, right? Is story of Demiculus? Sort of Demiculus.
I think it's the sort of Demicles, yes.
Sort of Demiculus.
Yes. Oh,
it's going back to and asking her, like, with all this fame and stuff, like, how is that? What are the risks that you've had to take care of now? What are the things that you've been facing? What are the things that's changed that you've had to be more aware of? You know, it'd be an interesting conversation to have with her, to know that just that one moment changed the sort of the pathway to how she lives life, you know? So, you know, whether it's people, hopefully she's not getting threats or, you know, but who knows? There's creeps out there. There's very different types of people. I think that's one aspect of humans is not, we always perceive, I don't think we always perceive people as good, but we have the benefit of the doubt that we think everyone is a good person. But I think low key a lot, like there are people that aren't, like, and I think we tend to forget that.
Yeah, definitely. Like I think I was going to sort of say with her, I think it's just, she capitalized on it pretty well, to be honest, as well. And I think she values her family and stuff based on the conversations she would have, like some videos I'd watch. She seems like a quite grounded girl. And I think that's the reason, and she's doing quite well to capitalize on it soon. But I feel like she's really well grounded in a sense. And so for her, like the path of corruption probably, who knows, maybe not, maybe not. I
mean, sometimes
she's doing quite well for herself so far.
I mean, the devil will appear at the most random times, and they appear at those moments when you're vulnerable and you think you're at the peak, you're going to get there. You know, that's where, and the devil is a metaphor. It's not the actual devil. I mean, could it be an actual demon? Maybe. That would be my dream. No, I'm joking. See a demon? No. I've been obsessing over demons a bit too much lately. Separate conversation.
Watching ghost hunting videos.
I do. I watch a lot of Sam and Colby.
That explains it.
Colby explains it. But no, like it's that's when it kind of goes into, I'm not sure if this will relate to the 7 deadly sins, but it's sort of, you start to, if you've got strong values, you won't sway away from it, for example. But if you're not well grounded, like you mentioned, or you don't have strong values, the temptations get to you. You know, if you've got $50 million dangling in front of you, but the cost of selling your soul, like, can happen, does happen. So yeah, you just got to be careful of that, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's just like, obviously the values and stuff that you have, which are going to be able to, and values that obviously that align with you, and they'll sort of prevent you from deviating away and going through path of corruption, essentially. But I think with values, they obviously change over time, and like as in they change over time based on your age, your maturity and life experience and things like that. But yeah, I think it's a good safeguard from preventing you from like other people's temptations, trying to reel you into something and trying to make you into something that you're not. And I think that's something that also that they can struggle with, like with having so much fame and so much things so quickly, where it's like, yeah, everyone knows you as this personality. Like with Hawk Tuah Girl, for example, all they ever know about her is just that she just said that one thing.
Yeah, as a Hawk Tuah Girl.
Tuah.
Yeah,
But if she now changes her way of thinking, right, or like she changes her personality and stuff, people won't value or care
exactly.
about it.
And I think people like. Do you even know her name?
No, I don't. I forgot her name actually.
Right.
She said it. I forgot it.
That's a insane thing. We don't even know. Like she's a person. That's a person with feelings that has, different experiences, different things. But all she's known for, and it's not a bad thing. Like I'm not. It was a funny viral moment, and that's what I think the world sort of needs. Is you need people that are just funny and just say things
good quality
unhinged.
memes.
Yeah, exactly. It's an unhinged moment. It's like Tim Dillon when he goes on his rants. You need that. That's what makes things funny and fun. So, but yeah, like it's interesting. Like we don't know her name. Like oh, there's a Hawk Tuah Girl.
Even with like a lot of these, like, even with like Neon and stuff, right? Like you see their personality on the streaming videos and stuff. That's not exactly who they really are.
Yeah,
It's
I
just
mean, Show Speedy's completely different.
He's completely. I'm sure he's like completely different if you actually talk to him in person. Like cameras off. Even kaicenet, all of these guys, they're completely different people. I mean, I've never met them in person, right? But I'm just saying, they aren't what they are in the streams, based on like how other people talk about them. They're like, oh, I've talked to like KSI and stuff, saying, yeah, I talked to Neon off camera. Like he's completely different.
Yeah.
And that's what they say on the stream. And it's true because, they're trying to maintain a type of character because it gets some views and clicks. Because that's what all social media is really about. How can I get clicks and views?
And you know what? You got to respect that hustle a bit.
Yeah, there's nothing.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, you can't. Everyone's got to make their bread somehow, right?
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with it. But I think it's just like we try and we idolize that type of personality of that,
rather
that
than idolizing the other aspects of them that could,
or like respecting like the other
values
and
that they have,
traits and stuff. And we think that that's how they are as like 24/7.
Yeah.
When they're actually, it's just a character. It's not. It's not them. It's not their true self, basically. And I think also they also can fall into that trap themselves, where it's like with FouseyTube, right? Over and over again, he kept changing his YouTube content and things that I feel like is conflicting with his values and also probably with his personality. Like the internet saw him as like this prank star like 10 years ago. That's what he was known for. Then he started to go into like this other realm. I think he wanted to connect more with like rappers or something. He didn't deliver on particular things. And then he's trying to bring up his status or he's maintained that image back again of like a prankster and stuff, but it wasn't going as well. And then he came back in. He took a huge break. There's a lot that actually happened which I don't even know of, which probably he's gone through like personal things, which has affected his image of himself and like how he portrays himself on social media. But then there's also like the part of him where he comes back and he's doing like a boxing match with one of these YouTubers. Comes back with like shredded, ripped. He's lost all this weight. Like is an inspirational figure. And then he lost the match. Then just falls off from there. Goes through like the phase again of like depression and all that, like 5 stages of grief basically. Comes back again, does another boxing match, loses again. He gets shredded and all that, shows his journey, inspirational, falls off again, and then takes a break. Comes back now, does streaming. And then he got like this deal from Kick or something. And it was like a really good deal. And he's just streaming like he was trying to stream 24/7 type of thing. And you can tell like he was not in a sane state. He even admits it, like in his latest videos. Like he wasn't in a state of sanity. Like he's just going insane. Doing crazy stuff like punching people's faces and stuff. He did all those things and he just wasn't in and I think he's trying to maintain that type of image because that's what's getting views, trying to get viral, right? And then now he took a break from that and then he's come back and I feel like now the version he is with himself is a lot more, I'll say calm, composed and just more true. He's not too obsessed with that. Maybe I haven't watched a lot of his videos, but his energy right now is very different to how he was back then. And I feel like all that was because he's trying to maintain this image that how the internet was trying to see him as.
That's an interesting you say that because I feel like if we look at KSI and Logan Paul, for example, right? Marketing geniuses in a way, right? There comes a point where you've just got to grow up. You know, like there comes a point where you've got to grow up and look at things differently. Like your audience for FouseyTube is a bunch of 12-year-olds, right? Back then. What the 12-year-olds like now or 15-year-olds like now is going to be completely different what 12-year-olds like back then. You know, so if we look at like Logan Paul and KSI, for example, as an example. Now, I'm not in any way, shape, or form. I'm not endorsing Prime. I'm not saying it's a great product. I'm not saying it's a bad product. I'm simply just looking at it from a business perspective, right? They built their brand of YouTubers. They've realized that a lot of their content absorbers were younger people, right? It's not 25-year-olds, 30-year-olds. It's young, under 18-year-olds, right? Whatever. They know that probably in this day and age, they're getting older now. So they probably can't keep up the persona or the character as much as they did when they were younger, right? And so how do you sort of combat that? You know, you want to make money, you want to sort of still stay relevant, but in a different way. Product, right? And I think, you know, it's probably it could be one of the worst case studies in the future, or it could be one of the best case studies in the future of how branding leads to certain things. And now they've realized that all these younger kids are just buying their products. You know, I mean, there are some that are still absorbing their content, but every kid that you ask, why did you get Prime? Because Logan Paul or KSI. Every kid, right? There's nothing wrong with that, you know, I think, but it goes back to the sense that sometimes you've just got to know when to move on and stay relevant in a different way. Like for FouseyTube, I think, you know, if you had a mentor or whatever it was, and look, I'm not in a position to even say this, but it's sort of going, your time's up. What you've been able to achieve in these certain years, you've done well. You know, it's time for you to stay relevant in a different way. Like sometimes you just got to pull the plug. Like, you know, I think PewDiePie now, he's sort of streaming and gaming and all that sort of stuff. He vlogs I think he's moved to Japan now. So he's sharing his experiences in Japan. Like he's now become more family orientated and his things have changed, you know, and along the way, yeah, people will be like, oh, PewDiePie changed, but you know what? Like change is important. You have to change, you know, and I think if we look at Logan Paul, KSI, they had to change. You know, did they try to sell their fights and create a fake drama and all that? Whatever, that's clout, whatever. They've got to do what they've got to do. But they moved away from that model of, I don't watch the YouTube videos, so I don't know what sort of content they're putting out. But if just look at objectively, they're probably not as animated anymore. Maybe they're focusing more time on different business ventures to stay relevant. And that's fine, you know. So I think sometimes you've got to be prepared for a change. Like, you know, all these YouTubers that we look up to, like, you know, Superwog, My Chonny, these guys, like, their videos are timeless. Like, every single Australian still has memories of their videos, right? And that's something that can't be ever taken away. But there's no trying hard to stay relevant. It's sort of accepting the fact that for that period of that chapter, that was a beautiful chapter, and I was able to impact so many people. Like, there's still Superwog videos that I think of on a daily basis, and I just laugh to myself. And it's like that; those two, both Theo and I don't know what, the guy Superwog, they gave us an experience that we'll probably not forget. And you know, it sounds very cringe when you say it that way, but it's true, you know. And they've had to move on with their lives now, you know. And maybe they make skits and stuff time to time, but they can't keep up with the same consistent because your audiences have changed now. You know, if we saw a My Chonny video and Superwog video now, we'd probably be like, like what they created back then now is not going to work, you know. So sometimes you've got to shift. You've got to shift your attitude. You've got to shift what you're working.
Would you say then that's like, from that perspective, it would be more so like, obviously, because it's like, it's in that case, it's like, are you prioritizing the audience? Are you prioritizing also your values as well? Because that can be also like very difficult to manage. It
is, and I think you've got to find a balance, but sometimes you've got to prioritize yourself. Like, if I looked at, again, KSI and Logan Paul, it was we've got a strong branding on YouTube. We've created a name for ourselves amongst a certain audience. Is there a way we can capitalize this on even more? So they've had to sort of think of themselves and the audience at that point. And it's like, okay, let's make a product that's sold in every single store. And it's the branding behind it. That's the thing. So be it. That's, in my opinion, that's a genius move. You know, people are like, oh, well, the sugar content, they're trying to sell products to kids, blah, blah, blah. It's like, but dude, like, you were buying Pokemon cards when you were 10.
And you're having like chips packets for like those
Yeah,
Tazos
with
anyways.
NRL, with those NRL cards, right? So the culture around kids collecting things or wanting things because of someone famous behind it has never changed. It's always stayed the same. Like, we've always wanted, I don't know if you remember, but like, they like Tony Hawk, for example, like the Tony Hawk games, and like, you know, everyone wanted to sort of be like a skater like Tony Hawk, right? Like, kids inspire from want to be a part of something. And so that's what those two, KSI and Logan Paul, capitalized on. So I think there's a balance between what you can deliver to your audience, but I think you sort of understand that your audience is getting older too. What I absorbed as a 10-year-old or 15-year-old is completely different now to what I absorb now. I watch Chris Williamson now and like Stephen Bartlett, Diary of CEO, and like other podcasts. I listen to Tim Dillon, right? But would I be absorbing like content like that that's made for specifically 10, 15-year-olds, that clout funny stuff? Probably not. And that's okay as well, you know?
And it's going to change in like when you're 30, 35,
100%.
40. It's just, that's the thing about like the image of ourselves and just our values. Like, it just shifts and changes. It transforms to more of like coming more closer to the truth. And I think that's the thing about all these, and you made a really good point about like all these influences, like adapting and changing and just accepting the fact that, oh, like your time's up. Maybe we can stay relevant in different ways, but make sure that you got to also realize who your audience is and also what your values are, and make that like the trilemma in a way, like just make that center point, which connects all of them. And you can preserve that way, rather than trying to be someone to prove to the audience to stay relevant when it's not even who you are. And that ends up actually corrupting you, and you go through years of pain and struggle, rather than if you just sat back and thought for hours, like, okay, this is who my audience is now. These are my values now. It's not the same as 10 years ago. This is what is trending. Is there a way for me to be relevant? But just aligning those three things together. And as long as you have those, I feel like it'd be quite sustainable.
You know what it is though? It's an ego thing. It's this mentality that things won't change, and what worked for me 10 years ago will work now. Hell no.
It's almost like if you think about like the sword of Damocles, it's like almost like him saying like, oh, the sword should the throne should accept me for who I am currently. And, and that's how it should run, like the kingdom.
100%.
Whereas if it did run like that, it would be completely corrupted.
Exactly.
Because you'd have a stronger force of like an enemy who's a tyrant who will completely destroy you, because you just don't have, you don't have those characteristics, as you said, qualities and traits to be able to go against someone like that, who might be a strong character, who's gone through all of that betrayal, difficulty, and struggle, and that's who you're going to be competing against. Whereas if you just say, oh, it should accept me for who I am, like what I am currently, it's just like, that's not how it would work. Or like the way me being an advisor to the king should be how how I should be as a king, but it's completely different roles. And I think that acceptance is very important.
Mm-hmm.
And as you said, the ego thing, being able to understand that, like I think I call it egoless and ego, because I feel like the ego isn't exactly an enemy unless you let it control you, where it's like to the point that you have complete no awareness of it.
Exactly.
Then it ends up actually, I would say, consuming your life. Then it's an enemy. But if you use it, if you have awareness of it and you're able to, because at the end of the day, the ego is actually just trying to protect you. It's trying to protect your brand or image of something. But if you're not aware of it and the consequences, negatives of it, then it ends up actually consuming you.
I agree. And I think it goes back to that point of, you've got to let go of certain things in order to go further. You know, like and it goes back to like sort of taking risk-taking behaviors as well. Like, if you're not willing to change and transform in the process and go down different paths, then you are not preserving that success. You're literally putting it down the drain, because that success is going to be molded by different experiences and different risks and different transformations that you go through. You know, the success isn't just built at layer one. There's so many different layers to that you can take it. If you think of, you know, sometimes you've got to take a step back, but that'll propel you a few steps forward. So yeah, like I think these, you know, going back to that idea, these streamers, you know, again, we just see things behind the camera. You see the person behind the camera, you don't see them outside of that camera. So you're just gonna be very conscious of that.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's a very good point of how you brought up like ego, and also like the idea of change and accepting that. Definitely. Sometimes, and that's, I think another thing about that is also like just not being too attached to the self, as in we have set defined parameters of like what we should aspire to be, and we're very fixated on that. Like, for example, you know, me being shredded, lean, all this type of stuff, right? And having this status with this amount of money and all this type of thing. If I stay fixed to that, there might be a point where I might actually lose that. Like I might, you know, as you age, your physique isn't going to be exactly entirely the same. Yeah, you might be fit, but being fit when you're 40 and 30 is completely different to when you're being shredded and lean 20s, because your testosterone and stuff isn't going to be the same. So it's like you have to then also accept that there's going to be change. Your ideal self right now is going to be completely different when you're 30, when you're 40, when you're 50, when you're 60. It's going to be different, and you just have to accept it. The self is always changing. Like, think about the day you were born to how you are now. You're not the same, you know, completely different. You completely changed. And that's exactly what the idea of self is. It's just accepting that change is inevitable and it's to be part of the process. And that's the beauty about it actually as well. And that way it's almost like you don't then become too, I would say, attached to the point that it ends up actually making you always be at a point of unfulfillment and no contentment, basically, just shame and guilt. So just accepting that is, I think, very important. That's why, like, I think of the idea of there's moments where you can be egoless and ego, like where you can integrate your ego. And the way I define egoless is just like I came up with some description where it's something that doesn't involve anything about, like, I would say anything with my persona. Like, the description I came up with was like a sentient being who has a desire for seeking wisdom and something, and like the truth, basically. It's very simple. A sentient being who has sensory organs that experiences things and is just seeking wisdom to find ultimate truth. With that, this is my definition of who I am. Removing ego. Like, I don't say like, oh, I'm like, I have this amount of status, or I have this amount of wealth. I don't say my name, because my name was something that was handed to me. It wasn't something that I chose. So I completely got rid of that. And in a funny way, when I think about this description of myself, which is just egoless, when things don't go my way and when things aren't exactly perfect, it keeps me at peace, because these are things that aren't tied to desires, or aren't tied to materialism or anything like that, or tied to the ego. And it just keeps me, I guess, composed and calm, because it's something that I can always do regardless. It's not bounded by any limits of the world. So that moment of being egoless, I think it empowers me when you're going through turbulent waves of life.
That's so fucking powerful. What you just said. That was deep.
Yeah, it was. But
that was really deep.
I think,
like, from talking about prime to being a sentient being. It's really well said, though. It makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense.
It's just a different idea and mindset, of this sort of Damocles stuff. I didn't probably relate it as well, but I think it's just another way of approaching it to be content and fulfilled, regardless of where you are.
Yeah. at the end of the day, you just want to be the best version of yourself rather than aspiring to be another person that you don't even know who they are. You know, I mean, they did not a study, but they asked kids now, what do you want to be? And a lot of these kids say YouTuber. I want to be a YouTuber, you know, and look good on them. But I mean, when you're young, you'll say whatever comes to mind and drives you. But it touches on the point, you know, as these kids get age, different experiences, different things, and they'll come to realization that maybe the amount of work and the amount of effort that's involved in getting content out, it's not for everyone. And that's okay. That's okay.